Automatic, Addison.
In this tutorial, we will create a C++ publisher for ROS2. Knowing how to write a publisher node is one of the most important skills in robotic software engineering. In ROS2, a C++ publisher is a program that sends messages across the ROS network to other parts of the system. Follow along with me, click by click, keystroke by keystroke. But before we begin, let's talk a little bit about why we should write a publisher node in C++ instead of Python. Well, using C++ instead of Python for a ROS2 node, it's like choosing a high-performance sports car over a regular sedan for a race. C++ is generally faster and more efficient, which is important for real-time applications where quick responses are necessary. Also, C++ gives us better control over how the robot's brain, the node, uses its resources like memory and processing power. And while Python is easier to work with, especially for beginners, C++ provides the speed and precision needed for complex tasks, making it the preferred choice for developing ROS2 nodes in scenarios where performance is important. All right, so open a terminal window and let's go to the workspace. Let's actually go to, let's see, ROS2 fundamentals. Let's actually go inside the package. Okay, we're inside the package, ROS2 fundamentals examples. Let's do code period. All right, type our password. Let's close this minimal pi publisher. Okay, so let's right click on the src folder. This is where our C++ code will go. And let's create a new node called cpp minimal underscore publisher dot cpp. All right, and here's our blank program. Let's X all of this stuff out. Okay, and in this program, we're going to do the same thing we did with the Pi minimal publisher. But in this, we're going to write C++. We're going to print hello world at our defined frequency. So I'm just going to skip over all the comments that I would normally do. Best practice would be to write a header with the file, description of the file, the subscription topics, publishing topics, author, and the date. But I'm going to skip over that just because we're just focused on the publishing piece. So let's start with our pound include. And let's do RCL CPP, RCL CPP.hpp. All right, this imports our ROS2 C++ client library, which we will need for our ROS2 node client library. And we also, because we're going to print the hello world message as a string, we also need to include the string library. So that's std messages, msg, string.hpp. And let's just type a note, standard message type for strings. Okay, and let's do using namespace std chrono std, let's see, std, using namespace std chrono literals. Okay, and this will handle time since we're going to be publishing at a frequency that we define. Okay, and let's start by creating our class. Do class minimal CPP publisher, and we're going to be extending the node class, which is in the node library. Everything looking good so far. Let's do curly braces. Do public Okay, and let's create our, let's actually bring that over here, public. Let's do minimal CPP publisher. Node. Okay, and let's name our node, open parentheses, minimal underscore CPP publisher. Okay, that's the name of our node. Okay, we're going to have a counter to count the number of times that we publish it, just like we did in our Python code in the previous lesson. Now we need to create a publisher object, which will be responsible for sending the string messages. And let's do that now. Let's do publisher. Publisher, spelled correctly, equal create publisher. Stood messages. Message. This is a type of the message. Open parentheses. Okay, and now what's the topic name? We're going to call it forward. Remember, it's / for the topic name in ROS2. And then we're going to do example topic, comma 10 for the queue size. How many messages will be held in queue? And let's set up our timer, which will dictate how often we are going to be publishing messages on this topic. And let's do it every 500 milliseconds. Okay. Stood bind minimal CPP publisher timer callback. Don't be intimidated by all of this right here. We're just binding the callback function, which we're going to create later, to this timer. It's got the timer callback. This is just regular C++ stuff, and then you do this. Also, you don't need to know all the details about this, but this is how you do it. 500 milliseconds is how often we're going to do it. And then we got this timer callback, which we're going to define in this particular class right here. We want that to be called at this specific frequency, which is 500 milliseconds. All right. And so this right here refers to this method. And you remember this from our C++ tutorial, our CL, CPP, info, get underscore logger. And then we're going to be publishing every half second. So publishing at 2 hertz, 2 times a second. Okay. Everything looking good so far. Timer, publisher. Closed out that parentheses. We closed out that parentheses. Okay. Let's clean this up a bit. Now let's create the timer callback. Timer callback. auto message equals stood messages message string message.data hello world plus stood to string and let's do count underscore plus plus. Count. Okay. So we created the string message and we're filling it with hello world and then the counter, counting the message, and we need to publish the message. So we do publisher, which we defined up here. And then we're going to do the publisher function here. Going to call it publish message. Save. Okay, now down below, right here, let's do private. Okay, and here's where we define our member variables. Do size t count underscore. Okay, and let's just write a message. This keeps track of the number of messages published. Okay, now let's do RCL CPP publisher stood messages message string, and then do shared pointer. Okay. And now let's do publisher. And we'll do the publisher object. I talked about pointers, shared pointers in my C++ tutorial, but that's what we're doing here. We're defining our member variables count and then publisher right here. This enables us to create the publisher and create a running tally of the number of hello world messages that we published. Let's close that out with a semicolon. Okay, now for our main function, int main, int argc, char argv, let's do this, brackets, and let's initialize ROS2 just as we did in Python, RCL CPP init argc argv. Okay, and let's create an instance of the minimal publisher node, C++ node. So we're going to do auto minimal CPP publisher node. Okay, and let's go over here to do stood, make stood, make shared minimal CPP publisher. Close those parentheses. Okay. And let's do RCL CPP, and then we need to spin the node so the callbacks will get called. Okay. And then once we're done, we've published and stuff and done all that, we'll press Control C. We want to be able to shut it down. So RCL CPP shut down. So this shuts down the ROS2, whole ROS2 system when the node terminates. And then end of program, return 0. Okay, everything looking okay. Okay, so we've got our size T count, we've got our publisher, we've got a little squiggly here, and it's saying, oh, timer's undefined. So we left out one of the variables. So down here, let's do RCL CPP. We're going to make use of the timer base right here, class, which is available in the timer RCL CPP library. And we're going to create a shared pointer. Okay, timer. And let's just say this is our timer. Any more squigglies? No. Everything looking good. Everything looking good. So let's just go through this node again and just explain piece by piece. So up above here, we would normally have our header right here, which would be at the top. So we do here. Yeah. So that's sort of a template right here. And I've got a plugin installed that will automatically create this template right here, which you can fill in. All right, and now you do your includes to include the ROS2 C++ client library. Do another include because we're handling strings, handling time duration. Here's where we create our class, minimal CPP publisher. This is the syntax. We name the node, create a counter right here to keep track of the number of messages. Here's where we create the publisher and put that into a variable called publisher underscore. Here's where we create the timer. We're going to be publishing every half second. We want to bind the timer callback function to this timer right here. All right, and then here's where we create a log message where we're going to be publishing every half a second, 2 hertz. This is where we define the timer callback. This function gets called at the regular interval of every 500 milliseconds. Here is where we create the message variable. It's going to be a string. And then we fill the data field in the message variable with hello world and the counter right here to keep track of the number of messages. And then we do the actual publishing here using the publisher variable, which we created here. And that's how you do it. Use a vote publishing method and then what are we publishing? A message, a string message. Here's where we define our variables. We have a count to keep track of the count. We've got a shared pointer, publisher, which is the variable we had up here, which is going to store the publisher. And then we have the timer, which is a shared pointer as well. And that's the timer right here, which is every half second. And then here's our main function, important component of all C++ scripts. We have the main function. Here's where we initialize ROS2, kick it in. We create our CPP publisher node right here, and then we spin it so that the callback gets called at the desired frequency of every half second. Then when we're done, we press Control-C, close the node. We want our ROS2 to shut down and clean up, and then return 0 is the end of the program. So we're going to save it now. Let's go to CMakeLists.txt. All right, because we need to make sure that our system recognizes it. And starting from the top, everything looked good. CMake Python, RCL CPP library, RCL CPY, using std messages. That's all good. Set dependencies, nothing changes here. Include directories, nothing changes here. Now that we have our minimal CPP publisher, we can uncomment that. Okay. And all of that is good. Let's just go back and just check it. Minimal CPP publisher. Okay, all of that's good, but let's go back to CMake. I think we need to change the name on here. So I called it CPP minimal publisher. So let's do source CPP minimal publisher.cpp. Okay. And all of that's good. Anything else we need to change? I think we're okay here. All right, install CPP executables. Yes, we do want to do that. So let's uncomment that. Okay. And that looks good. That looks good. Okay, so save that. CMake, everything's good there. Let's go to the package XML. Everything looking good over there. Okay, and let's close that. And now we need to go over to the terminal. And I have an alias called build right here. And build does nothing but go to the workspace, cd ROS2 underscore workspace. It runs colcon build and it sources the terminal to update everything. So I'm going to run that build. And let's see this if this builds successfully. If we have errors, we'll go back to our program and fix. Okay, it did build. So now you can run the node. And to run the node, we do ROS2 run ROS2 underscore fundamentals examples and minimal CPP publisher. And now we are publishing. So ROS2 run, name of the package, and then the name of the node, minimal CPP publisher. And we are publishing at 2 Hertz. So if you open up a new terminal window and do ROS2 topic lists, see, we have the CPP example topic right here. And let's see what's coming across there. ROS2 topic echo CPP topic. Here we go. Hello world. And here's our counter. Here's our string message. This is the data field of the string message. And we're keeping track of how many times we are publishing it. Now let's look at the frequency. ROS2 topic Hertz CPP example topic. And we can see the frequency is 2 Hertz. We're publishing every half second, just as we expected. So that's it for this tutorial. Thank you for following along, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Keep building.